This is the use case diagram for the CPU computer system. As you see in the diagram, there are varieties of actors and processes that make up the whole system. The actors are the shipping and receiving department, the maintenance, the clerical support, the software user, and the management. Both the shipping and the receiving department and the maintenance are involved in adding of the new computers. The software user is responsible for adding the software. The clerical support, on the other hand, also is involved in the adding of the new computers. He's the one responsible for producing hardware investment report. As you can see, in the use case add software, it extends to the use case create software category because it is optional for the user to create a software. Now, we'll go to the management, which is involved in query training classes and producing hardware software cross-reference report. Bring more specifications for the use case, produce hardware software cross-reference report, or group has been assigned to make the use case scenario out of it. So this is the use case scenario. Considering the format of the traditional use case scenario, the use case scenario for this use case is divided into three parts. The first part is the identification and the initiation. The second part is the steps performed and the conditions. The third part is the assumptions and the questions.
For the use case, initially is produce hardware and software cross-reference report. It belongs to the computer inventory area, and the actors involved in the use case is the management, because basically they are the one which is responsible in producing hardware software cross-reference reports. The stakeholder, which by definition have a high level interest in the use case, are the management and the school. Management because if ever there's a generated wrong report, they will be the one to suffer. And another one is the school, because of the fact that they will be the one who will use the computers. And they will be highly affected if there are any generated wrong reports. So it's better to make sure that the hardware and software are working properly along with the faculty, students, and staff. The use case scenario is under the B level, and the description given to it is to generate or produce a hardware software cross-reference report for all computers. And the trigger for this use case scenario is when the generated report button is clicked, meaning it is the only time that it will generate a report. The type of the trigger that will be used is external, because an external trigger by clicking the generate button is needed before having such an output.
Now we go to the second part of the use case scenario, which are the steps performed and the information needed for each step. The steps for the use case are clearly shown in this part. Basically, these statements represent the standard flow of events and steps taken for the successful completion of the use case. In this use case scenario, the first step is to read a software record, and the information needed for it is the input for the software record. Next step is use the software record to read the hardware-software relational table. The information needed for it are the software record and the input for hardware-software relational table. Next step is to read the hardware record. The information needed for it is the input for hardware record. Next step is to use the hardware record to print line accumulating totals, and the information needed for this step is the hardware record. Next step is to finalize the subtotals and grand totals, and the information needed for this step is the accumulated totals from the previous step. And lastly, print the report, and the information needed for this step is the finalized report. Lastly, the third part of the use case scenario, the conditions, assumptions, and questions. Here you can see that there are some conditions needed, such as the preconditions and the postconditions. The precondition is all information. Lastly, the third part of the use case scenario, the conditions, assumptions, and questions. Here you can see that there are some conditions stated, such as the precondition and the postcondition. The precondition is that all information must have been previously added to appropriate tables, and the postcondition is the desired output, which is the generated report. Included also in this part of the use case scenario is an assumption, in which all the information that are on the database tables are correct. The guarantee part in the use case scenario explains the expected and promised output to the users. The minimum guarantee of the use case scenario here states that the report could not be printed, while the success guarantee states that the report is successfully created. On the latter part of the use case scenario, the objectives met part tells us that the use case scenario produces information about what software is found on which machine. So here it is, the objectives met. The next one is the outstanding issues. The outstanding issues of the use case scenario includes what course of action should be taken when the software is older or is not currently installed on any machine. The priority, which is an indication of which use case of which should be developed first.